all these different denominations come together and they're trying to prove to the world that there's unity between them, when in fact there's very little unity at all between them. And they're all marching together and singing Kumbaya, and we're proving to the world that we're one. That's not what Jesus meant. Okay? That's not what Jesus meant. You bring two Christians together. Two Christians. And although they may differ in some things, but you bring two Christians together, and my friend, you will find unity. You will find spirit bearing witness with spirit. You will find joy. It is amazing. I can sit down, for example, on an airplane in Zambia and sit down beside a person I have never met in my life, and after a while pull out my Bible to kind of, hoping this guy says something to me like, "What's that?" Sometimes I pull out my Greek New Testament so they'll look at it and go, "What's that?" I can't read it very well, but it really makes a great witnessing tool. No matter where I am in the Greek New Testament, I read John 3:16 when they ask me to read something to them. But I can sit down with someone I've never met, and we start talking and discover that we are both believers in Jesus Christ, and I mean it is a party for the rest of the flight. We are one. People, there's so much disunity in the church. No, there's not. There's a lot of disunity with a bunch of carnal people who are goats trying to act like sheep. That's the problem. But when you bring believers together, there will be unity. Does it mean that there will never be disunity? No, it doesn't mean, because there's sin in all of us. It doesn't mean there'll never be disunity. It doesn't mean that there'll never be disagreements. But it means when you look at the full course of the relationship, there is a fraternal love, a unity there. I remember one of the illustration that I just love to use on this. I was traveling through the mountains years and years ago in a red zone that the communists, the Maoists controlled. And we were lost and everything. It was pitch dark and we were scared, another missionary and myself. And we made our way into this little village. And I kind of stood on the edge of it. My brother that was with me was Peruvian. And he went in. And he came back out. He says, "I don't see any military." So we kind of walked in, and I kind of humped over so everyone would think I was short. And we came up to this drunk, and we said, "Hay hermanos por aquí. Are there brothers here?" And he said, "La vieja por ahí. The old woman over there. She's one of you." And so I went over there, and I knocked on the door. After a few minutes, the door kind of creaks open as a little mud adobe hut carved into the back of a cliff. And this little woman, she's about this big, she opened the door with her lantern and looked. And I said, "Somos hermanos. Necesitamos ayuda. We're brothers." She knew what that meant in Spanish. We're evangelicals. We're Christian. And we need help. And she went, I'll never forget that face of her. She went, and she just grabbed us and pulled us in. Took us down to the basement that they'd carved out of the side of the hill there. Put us down there. A little boy came. She gave him some instructions. All of a sudden, he took off. He comes back running, and then this man shows up. He's got 2 chickens, and another little poor farmer comes up with some yucca plant, and they start preparing. And we stayed there all night. All right, now, they were won to the Lord by a group of Nazarene missionaries. The Nazarenes and I could sit down and debate some issues. We would. But these were people who knew Christ and knew their sins had been forgiven. And because I was a preacher in Jesus' name, willing to risk their life. There's unity. There's unity. Now, Theology is extremely important. It is extremely important. But I'll tell you this. I will not separate and break fellowship with someone who disagrees with me on some things. Now, I will separate with people who depart from historical Christianity, who preach another Christ, and so on and so forth. But you see, there's a unity there. They knew Christ. They rejoiced in Him. That's what happens when you have a church, and it's a church of people who have been converted, who have been regenerated by the Spirit of God. Will there be immaturity? Yes. Will there be problems? Live with me for a while. You'll get your answer. But will people be able to see there's something different about this group of people? And that something is their love. Jesus says they will know, the world will know you are my disciples by the love you have for one another. Now, He says, I'll give them one heart and one way, and then that they may fear me. Here's something about us as Christians. We can make a mess, but there is something that God has done to us. He has put His fear in our hearts. In a marriage relationship, my own, sometimes I will act like a jerk. Do you know what that word is? And not want to acknowledge it. Not want to say to my wife, I'm sorry. And I'll walk out there and I'll go into my office. Got a book to write. I got a sermon to prepare. And it's like the Lord's there. That's fine. You're going to be doing it on your own till you get this matter straight. But you know what? There's a fear in me. There's a fear. There's an uneasiness, an unsettledness in my heart, a tremor. And I know I have got to go back, and I have got to apologize, and I have got to make this matter right. You see, you have a group of people who have been given new hearts, and in that new heart the law of God has been written. And not only the law of God has been written, but He has put His fear in us, so that even when we have conflicts, disagreements, and problems, it is the fear of the Lord that causes us once again to humble ourselves and to acknowledge our wrong and to work for restoration. That's a church. Now, I want us to go for a moment. Again, I said I would have to skip around. I want us to go to Matthew chapter 28. You know the Great Commission in verse 18. And Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Oh, this passage. Last month I spent like 3 weeks on all authority has been given unto me. Oh, man, it laid me on the floor. We have very little idea what that means. But I would encourage you to read Daniel chapter 7 and Psalms chapter 2. Such authority has been given to Him. He has so much authority that all the kings, all their actions and decrees are inconsequential. They don't even matter. It's as though they didn't even exist. When His kingdom showed up 2,000 years ago, everything else came to an end. Oh, He's allowing the kings and the nations to still play as though they had life and power. But they have none. He rules over all. Now, but it says this, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations. I am so glad that he did not put here, go therefore and preach the gospel.